Carolyn, can you tell us, did you grow up in a Christian environment? What was your faith journey, and how did the SCM contribute?
Yes, I did grow up in a Christian environment, but I was brought up in Singapore, and then, where it's fairly a fundamentalist sort of background, I suppose. And I came from a fairly conservative background into university, where, in fact, the group I was part of, what was the Anglican Society at UWA, and even for a part the Christian Union. But I moved into the Anglican Society, and that's it was in the late 70s. About 79 was my first year at uni, and that's when we were starting to discover, I suppose, liberation theology. 79 was an important year in two respects. One is it was the date of the Sandinista Revolution, and we know the importance of the church in that revolution. But also in Western Australia, it was the Nookambah, sort of the damage, or the determination of the government to mine at Nookambah. And that was a situation where we had church people sort of sitting on in the roads trying to block the drilling trucks from going in. So it was all that time. So coming from a fairly conservative, and a lot of us were private school kids who'd come through that, and we suddenly discovered all of this. I think it was Andrew McGowan who went across to an ASCM conference in '81, came back and told us about SCM, and we all decided, yes, that's what we wanted to do. So I think, and that really got us into it even more. So there was, at 82, end of 82, Chum Creek Conference was my first national conference, though we've been running the SCM in Perth for a year, and that got me involved. So I suppose the whole liberation theology, the introduction at that stage to feminist theology, and Mandy, I brought this up. Sorry, can you see it? Yeah. Mandy, no, this is the booklet that you put together. I found that on feminism in the church.
That's right.
And so that was we sort of discovered feminist theology and all of that too through the SCM, and then I think that was a big eye opener for otherwise fairly conservative kids, I think, that we were at the time. And that whole, I suppose, the preferential option for the poor, and that drove me, I suppose, in the work that I chose to do.
Yes, fascinating. In a sense, it all fits together, Carolyn, in a wonderful way.
Yeah, and really the first, I suppose I started doing some Aboriginal heritage work with one elder who said to me, "You're the first person who's been able to actually put our beliefs properly into a legal document." And I thought, well, maybe the reason why I'm the first one that he's come across is because I actually have an understanding of the importance of the sacred.
Yes.
And there's an element of the solidarity of people who believe in the sacred. That we could understand that, and we could, I suppose, I could recognize that that from that, we might be book people and get our I suppose our theological beliefs from that, but how God would have spoken to people in the past before there was the Bible in this country was through the land, through these sacred places.
Yes.
Yes.
And probably brings us to your thesis. Could you tell us about your PhD thesis?
Yes, it's something it's one of these things that gets narrower and narrower as it goes, but I did my thesis on the impact of the public-private dichotomy in the religious freedom and religious cultural heritage laws in 4 countries, and the impact of that on the understanding of the concept of Indigenous sacred place. I suppose the conclusion I came to was that these are countries, Australia, New Zealand, USA, and Canada, similar in the sense of their legal system and the background of the Indigenous background there, but how the religious freedom laws are predicated very much on religion as a private matter, And the cultural heritage laws are predicated very much on cultural heritage as a public matter. And really, Indigenous sacred places don't seem to fit very well on either system. I mean, the classic example, I think, was a case that went to the US Supreme Court, a religious freedom case, where the action was going to completely damage the sacred place and destroy the religion completely. But the court said that that was not a breach of their religious freedom because it wasn't coercing their conscience. Oh. So the religion could be destroyed, but it didn't coerce the conscience. So, so that was sort of, the whole, I suppose, well, it just shows how the religious freedom concepts were just not suited. And similarly with the cultural heritage, it's seen as an external, it's based on what we as a wider society want to keep. And that's the origin of a lot of our cultural heritage models. And so you have an external decision maker deciding on what is really someone's religion, and using objective tests and things like that. Anyway, that's the gist of what I was working on. I did it just for fun, of course.
Yeah. And Carolyn, you're also very involved in the Perth Diocesan Council, the Social Responsibility Council of the Anglican Church in Perth, and also you're involved in the Public Affairs Unit of the National Australian Anglican Church. Can you tell us, what do you think are some of the important things that they are doing?
Well, starting on the national level first, I mean, we have been involved in the First Nations voice issues, constitutional recognition. We've been, and this is where it's been contentious, we've been involved in, I suppose, putting a different Anglican view from what we often hear in Sydney about sex discrimination and religious discrimination laws. And that's, of course, topical because we're about to get probably a new version of the religious discrimination bill. And that was actually one of the pictures I did put up earlier about, which was taken at a Senate hearing on the sex discrimination bill exemptions, and they had myself and they had Archbishop Glenn Davies and Bishop Michael Stead all at the same table, giving different views from the Anglican Church point of view.
And that was in 2019.
Yes, I think so. Early.
Yes.
2010, yes.
Yes.
And yeah, so that's been quite difficult to manage at a national level, as you can imagine, because there are different viewpoints. But the Public Affairs Commission has, well, we keep saying we're only speaking for the Commission, not for the whole church, etc. And I think there's obviously a lot of other dioceses who are happy to have our voice there, because it does at least try to balance out a bit what is regularly, what the view that's more prevalent in some of those places, in Sydney, for instance, especially. But yeah, environmental issues, climate change is obviously a big issue. That's at the national level. I think, yeah, those are probably the big ones we've been working on. The other things, the charities amendments, responsible lending laws. We made submissions to the COVID-19 Senate inquiry and that type of thing. But we have, I suppose, because we haven't got any staff at a national level, we didn't just do what we can. Modern slavery was another one we made submissions on. So it's a hodgepodge of whatever comes up. Or nuclear. We're trying to get Australia to support the anti-nuclear treaty. In Perth, pretty much the same, but there's probably less a variety of views in the Perth situation. So it's a bit easier.
And so what keeps you hanging in there in the National Anglican Church and in your faith, Carolyn? What do you find sustaining? What helps you?
Well, I mean, why I'm passionately involved is still for the same social justice reasons, going back to the whole liberation theology thing, but also, well, especially LGBTQI issues at the national level are highly fraught, and I think it's extremely important for a different Anglican voice to be heard. And that's why, because really, I suppose there are all these other dioceses that people forget about, which have different viewpoints on that issue. So I think that's where it's important for us to actually say, well, hang on, we want protection from religious discrimination, but really not so much for us. There are, the Muslims, etc., need it far more than we do, and we don't want exemptions that would allow us to be doing the discriminating against people, particularly LGBTQI plus people. So I think that's still what's driving me. I'm a glutton for punishment, I suppose, but that's I think that it's so important to hear the church's voice, to hear the church being alongside people who are on the margins.